and welcome to Can You Just Sit With Me? Where I discuss hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope during the challenging times of life. I am your host, Natasha Smith. Thanks so much for joining me today. I can't believe Daddy's gone. That is what I found myself thinking just the other day. Now, Dad has been gone from this side of heaven for 5 years now. And I had that feeling and I had that thought come to my mind. Does that happen to you? Like, where you're like, I can't believe he's gone. I can't believe she's gone, or I can't believe it. I still can't believe it. These are common expressions used to acknowledge the way we feel when we think of the loss of a loved one. Though the latter expression, I still can't believe it, can be used to express a sense of disbelief or loss due to like a bad situation or a negative event. These expressions can also be viewed as an indicator of being in denial. So today, that's what I'm going to be chatting about. I'm going to be chatting about denial in relation to the grieving process. So when we say, I can't believe XYZ, fill in the blank, is it really denial or is it something else? So let me first start by giving a few meanings for denial. According to Psychology Today, denial is a defense mechanism in which an individual refuses to recognize or acknowledge objective facts or experiences. It's an unconscious process that serves to protect the person from discomfort or anxiety. Now, the American Psychological Association says denial is also a defense mechanism in which unpleasant thoughts, feelings, wishes, or events are ignored or excluded from conscious awareness. It may take such forms as refusal to acknowledge the reality of a terminal illness, a financial problem, an addiction, or a partner's infidelity. Denial is an unconscious process that functions to resolve emotional conflict or reduce anxiety. So, in essence, denial is a natural way of coping. So, let's look at denial in the scope of grief and what we're talking about today. So, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is a psychiatrist who became known as a pioneer in loss and grief based on research documented in her book on death and dying, which was published in 1969. Her findings later became the basis of the 5 stages of grief model, which you may be familiar with and is commonly used. Now, the 5 stages of grief, according to Kubler-Ross, are from 1 to 5. 1 being denial, 2 anger, 3 bargaining, 4 depression, and 5 acceptance. And in the past, what would be thought as denial, according to Kubler-Ross, may not be denial as it relates to those who grieve. Perhaps the denial is really the reality of grief. And that's what I want to kind of talk with you or chat about further here. Because in the case of the death of a loved one, I believe when we say, I can't believe he or she is gone, instead of it being denial, it's almost like we're actually acknowledging the fact that the person is no longer here. It's not like you're walking around saying the person isn't dead or like you're thinking they're alive somewhere on earth, but rather I feel as if it's an acknowledgement or that you're acknowledging that they aren't here. And really, it's simply just hard to believe. And so it's like we're acknowledging it, but it's just hard to believe. So I'll use my dad as an example. I've known him my whole life, and though death is promised to us all, as the Bible says, it's appointed unto man to die. Then after that, the judgment, we as humans don't think about death as a common thing. And so, it's devastating when we suffer a loss, and especially with those who we have more of an that we're more interconnected with. again, for as an example with my dad, it was a devastating loss, because we did have such a bond. He had a bond with a close bond with all of his daughters, being a girl dad of four girls, and so we were all close to him. And truly, I believe the more you are interconnected with someone, the greater the grief when you lose them. So when I say I can't believe that is gone, I'm actually acknowledging that he is no longer here. But in the same sense, I'm simply acknowledging that it hurts. So when I say, I can't believe dad is gone, I can in essence say, oh, it hurts that dad is gone. So I'm not truly denying that he is no longer with us. I'm acknowledging that he's gone, but simply just expressing that it hurts. So I wanted to go ahead and make that distinction here, so we can kind of get an idea of, when we hear those statements, or if we make those statements, they may not necessarily mean that we are in denial. It may just be that we just are acknowledging a hurt. And we know that when we realize and acknowledge a feeling, a hurt, or a situation that was painful, that is really the first step or the next step to the healing process. Because if when we ignore the pain, or when we stuff our pain, we know that it actually festers, and that no resolution is made. So maybe instead of calling it denial in the context of I can't believe they're gone, maybe we should call it grief processing. In a new book by neuroscientist and psychologist Mary Frances O'Connor, called The Grieving Brain, in relation to what we're talking about, or what I'm chatting about, denial, she uses this example. She says, if the grief is for someone else, the denial is prolonged by refusing to deal with the consequences of death, such as visiting the gravesite, getting rid of personal belongings, or even filing necessary paperwork. So, for example, for me, when it says visiting the gravesite, is in not visiting the gravesite as an indicator of denial, as a refusal to deal with the consequences of the death. Y'all, it took me 3 whole years, three whole years to, after my dad died, to visit his grave. And it wasn't because I was in denial. It wasn't because I was ignoring his death. I knew and believed full well that he was gone from this earth. So much so, that's really one reason why I did not visit his grave. I didn't visit Dad's grave for 3 whole years, because I simply felt like, I know that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And I'm like, why am I visiting? And so that was really my personal reasoning behind not visiting. And so it couldn't be labeled as a denial for not visiting. So the thing and the thing I would love for you to catch here is that, we are complex beings, and the grieving process is not, and never will it be, a one size fits all type of deal. And so how I process is going to be different, how you process, and different for the next and the next and the next person. And so these categories and these stages just may not apply to every situation. And so again, when I'm thinking about these statements and these phrases, like, I can't believe he is gone, or I can't believe she is gone, I still can't believe this happened, those sort of things. I don't believe that they necessarily mean that there is denial there, but I think it's quite possibly the opposite, that we're acknowledging something. We're acknowledging a hurt. We're acknowledging the absence of something that is hurting us. And so I don't believe that it is necessarily means that we are in denial. So let me go back just for a quick minute to talk about denial in the context of the 5 stages of grief. Because you see, it's hard to compare apples to oranges, or rather you can't, right? So when discussing like the first stage of grief, denial, Kubler-Ross derived or came up with the 5 stages of grief based upon conversations and interviews with those individuals who were actually dying. And so, however, many counseling professionals use and apply her grief model to those who have suffered a loss. And that is not apples to apples, y'all. That is not a like for like comparison. The grief that I experienced over the loss of my loved one is different from someone who is actually dying. It's just not the same. So, according to Kubler-Ross, it was patients whom the doctors told were dying that denied their impending deaths. And so that's where she got the first stage of grief as being denial. And it's just not apples to apples when we're talking about the grief of a loved one versus someone who is actually dying. It's two different things. And so when we experience the loss of a loved one or even a non-person loss, most often the person or the object is gone, meaning no longer physically with us or available to us. So I believe there is actually more to this than denial just being this defense mechanism that we naturally have as it relates to grief. In having that thought, I can't believe they're gone, or I can't believe this or that happened. Now, I found this quite interesting in the book The Grieving Brain, again by neuroscientist and psychologist Mary Frances O'Connor. This is in my own words, just something that I found interesting in her book. She talks about how, like, the brain essentially maps our life. It maps our life and the people in it, as well as the people in it. So the brain maps our life and the people in it. So when our loved one dies, or if one of the people that in which our brain mapped is gone or missing from the map, they become a missing point within our brain map. Our brain then goes into problem solving mode in order to fix our map. And so it's like it's searching for that missing person. And so I believe that this is what causes some of the grief. And so we have this map that our brain has created this map, and it has people in it, especially when we're interconnected with people closely. We have close relationships with people, or even jobs and things, pets, when we have close relationships with it, and then it's taken out of our map. Her research says that our brain then goes into kind of like a problem solving mode, and it tries to fix it. It goes into trying to fix this missing piece. And I believe that this is one of the reasons why we have those expressions, or those expressions come to our mind, like, I can't believe they're gone, because possibly because our brain is saying something's missing, someone is missing. So it's like, oh, I can't believe they're gone, when in actuality we know that they're gone, but it's like our brain mapping saying something is missing. So I've said all this to say, I don't think when we're saying those expressions like, I can't believe he is gone, I can't believe dad is gone, I can't believe she is gone, I don't believe when we say those expressions that it's actual denial in the sense of the 5 stages of grief. I just don't think it's apples to apples or apples to oranges there. It's not a like for like comparison. But instead, I just believe that it's the continual processing of our grief. Because again, here's the thing. Grief can't be boxed into a stage, nor can it be labeled by what we are or aren't experiencing within a certain time frame, because we are so very different. I believe it was Kessler that actually says, grief is like our fingerprint. No one grieves the same. So can we just be allowed to grieve in healthy ways without labels? This is my prayer. It's just that some things really don't apply to everyone, or can't be applied to everyone. And we should just be made aware of that. So if you've had that thought lately, like, I can't believe they're gone, or, um, just look at it as I'm still processing. Look at it as if you're still processing the loss, or simply look at it as I'm still, quote unquote, in process on this grief journey, and that is okay, because the truth is, healing in grief is not a sprint, it's a journey, right? Healing is not a sprint, it is a journey. I truly believe, as it relates to grief, that is a lifelong process, you know. So I hope that you found this episode helpful. I'd love to hear from you. I'll leave a link to all of the resources that I mentioned during this episode in the description. Take care, you guys, and thanks so much for sitting with me. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for listening to Can You Just Sit With Me? If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back for my next episode of Can You Just Sit With Me? Until then, this is Natasha Smith, helping you to find hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope in the challenging times of life. Be sure to connect with me across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at I'm Natasha Smith.